I am Commodore Uday Bhaskar and I retired from the Indian Navy in 2007, roughly about 10 years ago. I was very fortunate by way of being able to join the Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis while I was in service. This was sometime in the late 80s and I was a relatively junior officer in the Navy at that time. I was only a commander. But I had very valuable support from our chief at that time, Admiral Ram Tehliani, who passed away recently. As a young officer, I was quite keen on these matters, strategic studies, security, defense and so on. This question about what is defense and strategic studies, well, basically I would say that in India in particular, this is a relatively new discipline. But any area of study that relates to national security, defense, strategic issues could very broadly be brought under the bandwidth of defense and security studies. Now, for a young person who wants to make this a career, my own recall is that as far as the Indian university system is concerned, there are three or four universities that in the old days were considered to be very, I would say, credible in terms of the kind of courses they offered. And here I'd like to identify the University of Madras, where the Defence Services Staff College in Wellington was affiliated to the University of Madras, and I'm talking about 20-25 years ago. They had a very fine faculty. And concurrently the University of Pune, which is also one of the older universities that offers defense and strategic studies. More recently, other universities also, I gather, are providing the same options. For instance, University of Punjab, I gather the University of Meerut, as also Allahabad, and now more recently, perhaps there is universities in Kerala and also Gorakhpur, perhaps Tirupati also. So I think, a website might be able to provide more information. And there are two ways, as I understand, where you can enter this discipline. One is there are some colleges affiliated to these universities that allow a student who finishes the 12th to go to the undergrad. The second option is to do a bachelor's in any of the standard disciplines. You might do it in history, you might do it in literature, you might do it in international relations, political science, whatever be the kind of options that are available at the undergrad level. And then when you are ready for masters, you can specialize. You can go to either focused defense and strategic studies, or you can do a master's in IR, that is international relations, or you can do it in pol science, or you can do it in history, and then make your way into one of the niches. Now, defense and security studies is becoming so, I would say, technologically oriented also. Hypothetically, if you are doing maths and you are into engineering or you are into computer science, I see no reason why you cannot, for instance, specialize in cyber security. Or for that matter, today space technology is a very important aspect of modern warfare. So I imagine that even if you were technically oriented and you had a background in engineering or in related physical sciences, it should be possible, for you to make this kind of transition into security studies. So I think today there is a lot of flexibility, and depending on the age, whether you are doing bachelor's or master's, it would also allow you to apply to the armed forces. Meaning these days, for instance, the Navy for certain places an enormous amount of emphasis on a technical background, either as an engineer or somebody who's done a BSc in any of the major sciences, mathematics. So my point is that you have the option of joining the armed forces depending on the age, either as a direct entry officer, or you can find some other scheme that may be suitable. So defense and security studies offers this as one option. I imagine it will also be of use if you apply for the civil services in India, or maybe if you are also inclined to join one of the think tanks. Of late in India, there has been a growing, shall we say, support for the think tanks. When I was a young analyst, the IDSA, or the Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis, was the only show in town. There was no other comparable think tank. And progressively, when I look back in the last 20-25 years, Not only have the armed forces of India, the Army, Navy, Air Force supported their own think tanks, as I mentioned, CAPS, CLAWS, NMF, etc. Today, the private sector is also supporting think tanks. And for instance, one of the better known think tanks in Delhi currently is the ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, which is supported by the Reliance Group. So like this, there are different, I would say, permutations, combinations. And while it is not so pronounced, some of the metropolitan cities outside of Delhi are also supporting their own think tank equivalent. Mumbai, for instance, has the Gateway House, which is supported by the corporate sector in Mumbai. Chennai has a couple of examples. Again, I gather in Bangalore there are some new think tanks that are being funded and supported by the private sector. So this is all, I would say, another possible option in terms of careers. And in Delhi, of course, the Institute for Defence Studies Analysis, the IDSA, where I got my initial grooming, is very, very well known. And one of the attractions of the IDSA is that it provides residential accommodation to its staff. Now that's a very big, shall we say, plus point when you are looking for a job in Delhi. But let me add that it is the only think tank and it has a certain guidelines about how they provide accommodation to the staff. But these are some of the openings as far as the discipline itself is concerned, defense and security studies, and the kind of universities that are available to it.